Well, here's the next part of the 2016 PFA offseason, and that is re-signing their players. Now, a couple months ago, they were just re-signing players that had no years left on their contracts to an extension. That was a little bit different. This one time, they're actually re-signing players that actually have contracts for a couple years, be it for many different reasons, mostly because players want the money and are threatening to hold out. So here is the list of all the re-signings and how long they are for and how much money. And the first of all was Chicago when they re-signed their defensive end Alfred Helms, who is one of the best defensive ends in the league, who started to threaten holding out if they didn't re-sign him to a long-term deal with a lot of money. And they did. They re-signed him to 6 years for $48 million. That is the highest paid defensive end in PFA history at the moment. And once he did that, oh boy, holdouts were happening across the league. And another player threatening to hold out was Orlando's running back Frank Evans, one of the best running backs in the league. He was strongly considering holding out if they didn't re-sign him to a long-term deal with a lot of money. And he did take it. A 5-year contract worth $47.5 million. And oh boy, the next best running back in the league, James Beverley of Las Vegas, when he heard about Frank Evans' new contract, he was the first player to actually officially hold out and threatened to not play unless they gave him a very big contract. And after a long-term bitter discussion, the Las Vegas Gamblers finally gave in and they paid him the highest salary possible in PFA at the moment, and made him the highest paid player, not only as a running back, but in the league, 7 years for $73,500,000. That maximum $10.5 million a year possible. So he is the highest paid player possible in the league. Boy, he struck gold. And then, much to Chicago's dismay, their fullback, Jonathan Bradford, who is one of the best fullbacks in the league, who is actually being only paid like $300,000, held out too to become the highest paid fullback in the league for 4 years for $8 million. And that was pretty disastrous for Chicago because now they're pretty cash strapped when they still got to go with free agency and draft to get ready to possibly defend their Century Conference title next year. Then after that was Baltimore's wide receiver, Ariel Leary, who, as a not really high draft pick, came out of surprise for nowhere, wasn't paid that much last year. He threatened to hold out, and Baltimore made him the highest paid wide receiver in the league, 5 years for $36 million. And then after that, the defending champion Omaha Thunder got their first official holdout when their offensive guard, James Witters, held out for a long-term deal, and he got that for 6 years for $51 million, making him the highest paid offensive guard in the league. And the surprising thing for Omaha is their quarterback, Archie Marvin, the best quarterback in the league. Mark Metz, their star running back, one of the best running backs in the league. And their star wide receiver, Steve Carmona, they didn't hold out at all. They're actually quite satisfied with their contracts. I'm actually quite surprised because they were such a great players for their team last year. And they actually criticized James for doing the holdout because that gave, although it wasn't that much money, that put Omaha in a pretty big hole in the salary cap space. So they're going to have a lot less to spend on possibly free agents and draftees to possibly keep this team in contention to defend their title next year. So, oh boy, I can't wait to see what's going to happen to them. Then it's another offensive guard, this time with Kansas City, as their offensive guard, their star offensive guard too, Clement Indias, who was very, very high draft pick in the expansion draft last year, only being paid like a couple $100,000. He got a new deal of 4 years for $28 million, which is kind of low for his skill because he's like one of the best offensive guards in the league all of a sudden. But he took way less money for Kansas City, as he claims he wants to take a little bit less to ensure the team has enough space to get someone really good to help make this team a playoff team next year. After that, we go up to Denver, where they re-signed their offensive guard Matthew Stark for 3 years for $9 million. Then after that, we had another problem in Louisville, as one of their best offensive players, Jesse Hawley, an offensive tackle, held out too for a bigger deal, and he got one with 4 years for $16 million. as the team still try to figure out what they're going to do in the draft coming up soon. After losing one of their best defensive players, Oakland could not afford to lose their star defensive tackle Casey Kirk, the best defensive tackle in the league by a mile, as he held out, and they agreed to a 6-year, $63 million contract, making him the highest paid defensive tackle in the league. And I also forgot to mention, if I didn't already, when Omaha re-signed James Withers to that $51 million deal, he became the highest paid offensive guard in the league. New Orleans, having one of the best linebacking cores in the league, faced a particular problem when their linebacker Jeffery Cornell also started threatening to hold out. So not quite making sure that doesn't happen, they agreed immediately to a 6-year, $60 million contract for him, making him the highest paid linebacker in the league. And then after that was the Phoenix Storm, who re-signed their strong safety Frank John, who was not paid really at all last year, to a new 6-year contract for $52,500,000, making him the highest paid strong safety in the league, which they need pretty badly because that defense is their main strength of this team. And last but not least is the Jacksonville Bucks, who they're on free safety David Stock, the best free safety in the league by a mile, and like the only good defensive player on the team, held out for a better deal since he's the best player on the defense, and they agreed to give him a new contract for 5 years for $49,500,000, making him the highest paid free safety in the league. And that is it of all the players that held out or threatened to hold out so far in the free sign period. No other players have re-signed yet. If anything else happens, we'll do a brand new video on that. But next up, oh boy, it's possibly trades, and it might be like an individual video each, since who knows what's going to happen, and who knows, maybe that quarterback controversy in San Francisco between Anthony Marks and Ruben Williams, will it finally be settled? I guess we're going to have to wait and see.